How's it going, guys and girls? Hope you guys are having a great week. So I'm back today with another video, guys, and this one is just kind of like a gaming news video, sort of an opinion video. I read an article a couple of days ago on Kotaku, which was actually all about Shadow of the Tomb Raider, which, as you all know, is set to be released in September, and it has been confirmed there's going to be a lot more information about that game at E3, including hopefully some gameplay footage. But I wanted to talk a little bit about it. So this article was actually written by Jason Schreier, I think I said that right, and basically it was talking about how much Shadow of the Tomb Raider cost. So David Anfossi, who is the boss of Eidos Montreal, told the trade website Games Industry.biz in a recent interview that Shadow of the Tomb Raider actually cost between $75 to $100 million to make, and that's just the production cost alone. And actually, in terms of promoting the game, that's cost roughly about $35 million. Now, you might be wondering why I'm talking about Eidos Montreal. For those of you that don't know, basically, the first two games were primarily created by Crystal Dynamics, but Eidos Montreal actually did a lot of work with Crystal Dynamics on the first Tomb Raider game, specifically focusing on the multiplayer element to that game. Well, Eidos Montreal have taken over control of Shadow of the Tomb Raider, and they are actually the primary developing team behind the game, and Crystal Dynamics instead since 2015 are actually working on an unnamed Avengers themed title. So Eidos Montreal are probably most well known for their Deus Ex franchise, and they're very well known for RPGs and very sort of single player story focused campaigns, and they have confirmed that Shadow of the Tomb Raider is going to be a story focused game. It's not going to have any multiplayer, and that's not really what I'm here to talk about today. It's just some interesting information for you guys if you weren't aware. But what I want to talk about is this constant fixation on how much video games cost, and how for many publishers sort of look down on single player games and kind of argue that really it's not feasible to maintain these games, and that games are becoming a lot more expensive and a lot larger in scope, and that developers and publishers are no longer able to maintain that, and that ultimately this is the reason why we have things like microtransactions, loot boxes, season passes, that kind of thing. And obviously why we're ultimately going into this sort of games as a service kind of thing, which I'll talk about a little bit more towards the end of this video. But I wanted to talk a little bit about Anfossi and, you know, some of the statistics that he was throwing out there and some of the things he argued. So obviously Anfossi has argued that Shadow of the Tomb Raider has been extremely expensive to make, obviously costing, you know, $75 to $100 million. Now, that for you and me might seem like a huge figure to throw out there, but actually if we compare it to the two previous games, the first Tomb Raider, which came out in 2013, and then the second Rise of the Tomb Raider, which came out in 2015, it's actually not an unusual sum. And actually the original Tomb Raider game itself, I think, cost nearly $100 million, and then Rise of the Tomb Raider cost roughly around about the same amount as well. So it's not like they've massively increased in terms of the cost of it. Now, I think in this Kotaku article, it sort of broke down those statistics a little bit in a little bit more detail, and it sort of said that, you know, the monthly estimated cost of producing a single player video game of that caliber and AAA standard of that size would cost on estimate about $10,000 per month per employee. So working on Shadow of Tomb Raider, there are actually 500 employees working on that game, and if we were to do a little bit of math, so let's say the game took 4 years to produce, 500 employees. So if you were to do the maths on that, that's 500 times 48 months in those 4 years, times $10,000 per month for each employee, the game would actually cost about $240 million. As we can see, it hasn't cost that much. And what is the reason for this? Well, the original two Tomb Raider games actually were developed in San Francisco, whereas in comparison, Shadow of the Tomb Raider has actually moved development to Montreal, and which is apparently a lot cheaper in terms of producing games. Apparently, Eidos Montreal actually benefits heavily from tax credits from the Quebec government, which means they are able to produce games at a cheaper rate, which is why this game is not costing, $240 million and is actually costing about $100 million. Whatever these statistics, if you consider it's not really increased or it's actually cheaper than other games like Call of Duty, for example, if we look at that, David Anfossi is still arguing that in order to make a profit, that the game would have to actually sell huge numbers. And I think he said something like, if the games at the moment, physical copies sell at $60, that the actual publisher themselves only make about $30 off of that. Whereas in comparison for digital sales, for every $60 that a game costs digitally, the developer and publisher make about $42 per sale. So they were saying, based on that and the amount of money already spent on Rise of the Tomb Raider, that they would need to sell roughly 45 million copies of the game to ensure that they make back their money and sort of at least make even. Now, there's been a lot of speculation about the cost of the previous Tomb Raider games, and also a lot of speculation about Rise of the Tomb Raider and why Crystal Dynamics decided to decided to accept Microsoft's bid to make it a year exclusive on the Xbox One. Now, from the statistics that we look at that time when the game came out, obviously there was a huge backlash against Crystal Dynamics because there's a huge following and fan base for the Tomb Raider series on the PlayStation. The original Tomb Raider games, pretty much exclusively, I think by one title, actually came out on the original PlayStation. So a lot of PlayStation fans felt kind of bitter and a little bit betrayed in that. But there is a lot of speculation as to why Crystal Dynamics decided to take that risk and why Square Enix specifically decided to agree to that deal with Microsoft. And a lot of people think that it might have been pressure on Square Enix, particularly from kind of the top kind of shareholders, so that they wanted some kind of like guaranteed income from Rise of the Tomb Raider. I think there was a lot of backlash when the original Tomb Raider in 2013 came out, and even though the game did very, very well, and I think it sold like 4 million in like the first 2 weeks, which is an amazing record, it still wasn't good enough for Square Enix, and they were expecting to sell more. So I think that added a lot of pressure onto them, and I think that might have been one of the reasons that they chose to accept Microsoft's bid, that maybe they said, right, we'll pay you, $40 million to give us the exclusive right to Rise of the Tomb Raider. And it might have been a financial pressure on Square Enix and on Crystal Dynamics, and that might be why they decided to do that, because they didn't expect that the game was going to sell as well as they were hoping it to do, or they were concerned about making the money back, that kind of thing. Well, in terms of Shadow of the Tomb Raider, obviously those concerns still exist for Eidos Montreal, especially with Anfossi talking about the fact that they're going to need to sell 4.5 million copies to break even, and ultimately that's not going to be sustainable for the future, and they might have to look at increasing the cost of games, whatever that might be. Well, I'm here today basically, guys, to debunk that argument. I've done some of the some maths around it and some of the statistics, and I've done a lot of research online. I will post some of the articles in the comment section below for you guys, but I completely disagree with the fact that these games and these developers and publishers are not making money. They are making a lot of money. So if we have a look at the actual two Tomb Raider reboot games that have come out, which is the original Tomb Raider in 2013 and also the Rise of the Tomb Raider, which came out in 2015. Those games have been incredibly successful, in my opinion. Of course, the original Tomb Raider game, when it was originally released last generation, and then when it was re-released this current generation, when they produced remastered versions, that game has sold massively, and it's actually been confirmed. I think it got confirmed in the end of 2017. An article was written, and they kind of revealed in sort of a Games Industry International interview, Square Enix CEO Yosuke Matsuda, excuse me if I completely butchered that name, he basically revealed that the combined sales for the original Tomb Raider games, and in total both games actually sold 18 million copies. Now that's of course including both physical and digital copies as well. The Tomb Raider game in 2013 actually sold 11 million, and Rise of the Tomb Raider actually sold 7 million. If we were to actually work out how much in terms of what that would mean. So for example, obviously if those physical copies were sold at $60 for the copy of each game, but the developer only got $30 of that, and of course digital sales as well, the developer would get at $42. Let's say half of those sales were physical and half of those sales were actually digital. If we were to actually work out the math based on those sales, the total actual earnings for those games would be a whopping $648 million. Now, those two games cost about $100 million each to make. So those cost about $200 million to make. So, you know, $200 million, you've broken even there. But you are still looking at a $448 million profit. That is over a 200% profit. So whatever they might argue, whatever developers and producers might argue, is complete rubbish, in my opinion. You can't argue that these games are not making a profit. Shareholders and stakeholders should be looking at these statistics and, to be fair, should be happy with them. There is no need for this whole argument that we have to have microtransactions, we have to have loot boxes, we have to have online multiplayer all the time from publishers like, for example, Activision and EA, which are implementing a lot of these kind of online only and a lot of these kind of multiplayer and loot box elements often into previously single player focused games, like for example the Mass Effect franchise. There is no need for it, and you can't argue that these games are not making the profit. Just the statistics there that I've worked out and the maths I've done there just completely argue against it. But whatever that might be, a lot of publishers like EA are still arguing that single players are a dying breed, that they're eventually going to go, and that ultimately games are going to become what's called, you know, a service, basically a live service. I honestly think that given recent trends recently with the Xbox Pass, PlayStation Now, EA Access, all these things, that ultimately we're going to go down the route of Netflix and Amazon Prime, and I think that is what is ultimately going to happen. All these big publishers ultimately are going to ask us to pay monthly subscriptions to gain access to a library of games, and that could also include new releases as well. And you know, that's the only way that these shareholders and stakeholders are actually going to guarantee money, you know, guaranteed sales, because less and less people are pre-ordering, because on so many occasions they've been disappointed, or they've been their pre-orders haven't been honored, or you know, there's been a lot of underhanded things hidden behind paywalls and incomplete games, and games released in unfinished buggy states, all sorts of things. So, you know, that's what publishers are arguing. Now, my argument in terms of single player games being a dying breed, that's bullshit. Basically, is my argument. If we have a look at a lot of single player focused games in the last sort of 2 or 3 years, let's have a look at them, shall we? Games that haven't had a multiplayer element at all, right? In the last sort of 2 to 3 years that have done massively well. 2 of those games have both won Game of the Year, Legend of Zelda and The Witcher 3. And then this year we've had God of War, which was released very recently and has done exceptionally well. It's a masterpiece of a game, a beautiful, beautiful game. It has no multiplayer element. Santa Monica Studios have taken their time developing something that, in my opinion, is one of the best games to come out this generation. And it's a purely single player experience. It's a linear focused story. And you know what? It doesn't hurt for it. And you know what? It's been #1 in the UK charts for the last 4 weeks. I am super interested to see what those sale figures are going to be and actually how much money Santa Monica Studios are going to make from this game. And Sony as well. So whatever EA might say, whatever Activision might say, whatever concerns David Anfossi has, your concerns are unwarranted, sir. Lots of gamers are interested in single player games. There is a huge market for it. And if you produce a game that is good quality, people will pay for it. But people are unwilling to accept $80 games and $100 games for lackluster, poor content. They're just not willing to do it. Look at the most recent Destiny 2 Warmind expansion DLC. There's been so much backlash against that DLC just simply because of lack of content, lack of anything new, lack of creativity. So yeah, those are generally my thoughts on the article. I just wanted to share that with you guys because I thought it was really interesting, a really interesting article, and something I really wanted to talk about and share with you guys. So those are my thoughts on it, obviously, and obviously my thoughts on regarding how much money Shadow of the Tomb Raider is costing. You know, whatever's happening, I am interested in Shadow of the Tomb Raider. I am happy to hear that it is focusing on single player. I'm happy to hear that it's cross-platform. I won't be pre-ordering the game because I refuse to pre-order games now. I just refuse. I will be continuing my boycott of EA, especially given recent news regarding EA that they are continuing their practices and they don't seem to have learnt from their mistake, based on sort of what they've been saying recently. And I will be boycotting any games that do have, you know, really underhanded microtransactions, loot boxes. So I will be checking reviews. I will be seeing what people are saying about them. But you know what? The year ahead looks good, guys, because there are so many great single player games coming out in the next couple of months that are going to be absolutely incredible. We've got Detroit Become Human. We've got in May, end of May, we've got Vampire in June. There's Shadow of the Tomb Raider in September. There's Red Dead Redemption 2 in October. The list goes on and on and on. There's Spider-Man. There's so many good games coming out, single player focused games. So I don't care what any of these publishers say. They're talking absolute rubbish. Single player games are not dead. They are thriving and they are doing very, very well, in my opinion. But that's just my opinion. That's what I generally think and what I wanted to share with you guys. So obviously let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. What are your thoughts on the article? What are your thoughts on single player games, the future of gaming, games as a live service, all those things? Please share in the comment section below. If you did enjoy the video and found it interesting, please of course hit the like button as always to show your support. Please share the video so that it gets out there and more people see it. And obviously if it's the first time that you've tuned into my channel today and you enjoyed the video and you'd like to see more, please hit the subscribe button and of course hit that notification button as well so you can get updates on any new videos that I produce. But anyway, hope you guys have a great week. Take care, and as always, happy gaming. Bye guys.